That's a good way to look at it. This is the 20th century contained within the covers of a small book.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
Speak peace like a Buddhist.
A unique show spotlighting people, ideas, science, culture, and art. Your host, Mike Leavitt.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to that great podcast in the sky, And If Love Remains, and I am its humble messenger, Mike Leavitt. We're actually doing a simulpod for this episode, where I'm here with my good friend, the man, the machine, the teacher of liberty himself, Joey Wolverton. Welcome back, my friend.
Brother, it has been, as we say down here in God's country, a coon's age, man. It's been a hot minute since we've been on the wheels of steel here. Mike, the Madman Leavitt, on the ones and twos.
You know, it's been like, it's funny. I almost want to call it like a rebranding. So the simulpod.
Don't call it a comeback.
Right. It's a comeback. We're doing, this is And If Love Remains, clearly, but also our Return to Liberty. So please, my friends, if you're listening to this on And If Love Remains, Teacher of Liberty, any other place you may find this on the interwebs, Return to Tradition, please, check those other places out, subscribe, enjoy. The content is great. We've been wanting to do this particular, by the way, I love everything about this subject.
There's nothing to not love about it. Man, come on.
This subject.
Well, and that's, you, of course, you would, there's nothing, literally, it's like one of those stories where you're like, how most stories, particularly stories from history, there's always someone that disappoints you.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? Even guys that you're like, you take George Washington. Look, I know we're going to get a lot of hate. But my man listening to Grima Wormtongue, a.k.a. Alexander Hamilton, and riding up there in the whiskey, come on now.
Right,
G-Dub.
right.
Come on, G-Dub. You kind of let down the side there. But in this story, nobody lets you down.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, these dudes are like, okay, I'm not going to pop the cork.
Well, I will say,
I'm not going to pop the cork, but I'm just saying nobody in this story lets you down.
We want, what's great about this story, it's everything that we love about Return to Tradition podcast. The story is, and I'm trying not to frame it too much because I want the story to speak for itself, but like, you want to know why you haven't heard about the largest, most deadly shootout in Arizona history? You're going to find out why you haven't heard about it. Or if you have heard about it, why it's been reframed in the absolute opposite way.
Oh my gosh. And not only in Arizona, this is one of those things that in American history, there was a time that this was known in American history, right? It was, these people's names were known abroad, but now you don't, I did not find in one history book where it was mentioned. And believe me, I have a grip of history books as a former American history teacher. Not one of them mentions this. Not one. Of course, not one of them mentioned the fact that Arizona joined the Confederacy.
Hey.
Which, anything below, what is it, Prescott down was, so where you live right now was in the Confederacy. Now, it ended before Arizona was able to get a star on the Confederate flag, but nonetheless, 2/3 of Arizona was in the Confederacy. But the point is, nobody talks about this story at all.
Yeah,
and if you do stumble across an account of the story, you're Googling it up, you're DuckDuckGoing it, whatever, it will be, as you said, it will be cast in such a different light that it would not appeal to people who who share a political bent with you and me. They would not. They would be like, why do they like this story? This story's stupid.
Right.
But
or I'll tell you my experience. I was at a meeting for the I forget the Society of the Mormon Pioneers, something or other.
Ooh, hi, yeah, I'm an aristocrat. Hi.
Right. So I showed up at this meeting that I was invited to, and I'm talking to this guy. And by the way, the other thing I love about this story is that you and I learned about it at the same time.
Facts.
We
Facts.
had
both of us were like, what? It's so cool though to have that experience, because people I'm known to be a teacher and to teach kind of off the beaten path stories, and to teach via story, and then for you and I to be sitting there and someone tell the story, and we're both like have just entranced, because never heard. I love being a student more than I love being a teacher, and we were just sitting there and this dude's telling us this story like, how do you not know this? And we're just like,
what? Right.
And then you look it up and it's even cooler than he told us.
It's even cooler. So I was gonna say, so I'm at this, I'm trying to explain the story to somebody, because I thought, hey, these are history people, they would dig this story.
For real.
And the guy's like, well, we had some people on the other side of the story and they have a little bit different take. I'm like, I bet they do have a different take, Satan. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Who could be writing that other take? I don't know.
Right?
Satan.
But it's wonderful. And the other thing, like, I feel like I was just watching Talladega Nights, which, by the way, is a Christmas movie. And I was watching that, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby. And there is Ricky Bobby praying to baby Jesus and talking about how there's different Jesuses, the bearded Jesus, the teenage Jesus, the adult Jesus.
6 pound, 7-ounce baby Jesus with his hand wrapped around Mary's finger.
And I felt like, as I'm remembering this story in my head, I'm thinking, I like the table topping Jesus right now.
Yes. Give me a good whip Jesus.
That's right. Anyway, so where do we start with this thing?
Well, you're not from Arizona, but you've lived there long enough to be from there. Want to introduce it a little bit? I mean,
so here's the thing. So
just kind of give the run up to it, and the story as it unfolds tells itself, and instantly people are like, okay, I get it why these two yahoos like this story.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have to imagine this is 1918. So we're a bunch of 19th century people living in the 20th century. A bunch of, like, these guys are cowboys and they're living in rural Arizona. And when we talk about like Safford, Arizona and that general area, like it's Nowheresville.
How do you pronounce the mountains? Galuro?
Guerrero, I think. I've heard it pronounced
Galuro? I don't know. But anyway, those mountains up there. Yeah, I don't know. They all every one of those little ranges has a different name. But yeah. The mountains of Arizona.
It's yes, southeast Arizona, rugged.
Southeast, yeah, very wild, very. What you think of if you've seen cowboy movies, that were filmed in Arizona, this is where they were filmed,
right? And as in all great westerns, you've got the townspeople, and then you've got the cowboys, and you've got the people out on the rural that are doing the real work, and so. And there's a little bit of a I'm going to call it like a class warfare thing going on there.
Yep, for sure.
Because
you've got the speculating mining class,
right,
who aren't doing any work but are deriving wealth from the ground,
right,
but who are not only not living there but not working there and simply taking wealth from the ground that's obtained by the poor working class.
Yep.
And then you have, so you have that story. You have a wealth, a class, a class conflict. But then you have also a government versus individual conflict, which. And then you have military-industrial complex thrown in for good measure.
For sure, and there's also a huge religious component to this.
A big religious component.
And And it's an important part of this story because,
Yep.
those conflicts all come together.
I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, we're talking, literal cowboys, like, before World War One.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this. It's just rugged, man. It's just really rugged. Just put those images that you have of those rough and tumble Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday. This is their era, and this is their part of the world.
Right.
Like,
but at
literally,
the same time, they're like coming into this like more industrial,
right? Yeah, because World War One is creeping up. You've got, you've got a lot of things, man, that we stand opposed to. The World War One, which we were promised, I'll never send your boys to die for a European, fight, which
right,
BS, to put it mildly.
Mildly, yeah.
And then you've got what? At the same time, you've got the 16th Amendment saying, hey, all your money is belong to us.
Right.
And then you've got the Federal Reserve.
Uh-huh.
And then you've got the train. You've got just cars,
cars.
You're right there when Henry Ford is like, hey, let's make about, 100 of these a day versus a couple a year. So these guys that live, on the periphery of society in many ways, they would be content to be left alone.
Right.
But the manifest destiny won't leave them alone.
That's perfectly said. And so you have this family, you've got the Power family, and they're the ones that are living they're living out in the sticks in a cabin. They're cowboys, but I think their father is also, is looking for gold. He's got a mine that he has a claim to.
And the patriarch has a cool story because, he's he's mining himself, but for himself, right? He's not like the employed by a speculator. He's doing his thing, but he's got his wife, 4 kids, carving out whatever subsistence living they can, mining, farming, and he's a Civil War veteran.
Right.
I mean, this is a story that the dad, and this is the crazy, dude, as we get through, this is the crazy story. The dad's a Civil War veteran.
Yeah.
Okay. Moves out to the final frontier of early 20th century. I mean, you couldn't get more remote. I mean, unless you were up in the Yukon, which probably would be equal remote, just one's hot and one's cold.
Right.
But it goes all the way up through the 1960s, this story.
Yes.
Which
this is the perfect like bridge story. Like if you want to understand how the 20th century happened in a microcosm.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it. This is the 20th century contained within the covers of a small book.
Yeah, exactly.
And this, so the guy, the Jeff Powers is, so it's the story of the Power brother. I mean, I guess we should say that, right? The Power family, the Power brothers, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. So Jeff Powers, the patriarch, the dad that moves out west to, to find his fortune, make a living, just like you would.
Right.
And so there they are living, they're not rich by any stretch.
No, they're living in a small cabin and they're not they want to be by themselves. They want to be left alone. And
this is ultimately that's the where the rubber hits the road, right?
Right.
They are hardworking. They are rugged individualists.
I was going to say, if you look up the word rugged individualists,
and it's their picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they develop a reputation being very hard workers, very sincere, very good people, but very fiercely independent.
Right. People would probably call them aloof if they were trying to be negative towards them.
Immovably, steadfastly independent.
Right. Right.
Immovable and steadfast in their commitment to be left the freak alone.
They had no desire to be part of a community. They came into town to get supplies from time to time, but they wanted to be left alone, and they wanted to do their work and live the kind of life that many families have lived over the course of human history, frankly. And And unfortunately, the empire was searching after them, it seems like. So World War I begins.
Yep.
And
over there, the Yanks are coming.
And with World War I, not only does are we get pulled into a war that was promised we wouldn't, but also now our boys are being kidnapped and through this. By the way, this blew me away. I didn't realize that they actually implemented the draft 6 months after they entered the war. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wait, what a that's the ultimate bait and switch. We're not going to send you to war. We're not going to be a part of this European war. To all the way to now, we're going to steal your boys to go to this European war. And by the way, I want to be on record right now. So anybody in Washington, Andy Biggs, are you listening? Biden, are you listening? Trump, are you listening?
Biden, come on. Biden.
Okay, the people that are controlling Biden, are you listening?
Biden just hears the voices in his head. Pudding.
Let me tell you, this story will replay itself. You come for my boys. I'm just telling you that right now.
Oh my gosh. You come for my boys.
Yeah.
If Mike and I are living in the same area and you come for Mike's boys, you better bring some body bags, son, because you don't need them.
Yep. Anyway, so draft happens, and there are so many unfortunate people that they love to be told what to do, and
bootlegging mother scratchers.
Oh my gosh. And so, and I don't know all the circumstances, but I guess there's a day where everybody is supposed to quote report for the draft.
Yeah, I mean everybody between 21 and 31 had to register. Then they had the conscription, the draft, and so they would send out federal agents assisted by local sheriffs to just scour the air, because you got to realize, man, this isn't going to Memphis, Tennessee or Gilbert, Arizona looking for people. This is one or two or three, 10 families every 100 miles.
Right.
And so they go out, the sheriff, the U.S. Marshals, scouring the hinterlands for these young men, 21 to 31, who have not yet signed on to be cannon fodder for the empire.
Right.
And so, so it's they come looking 1918, February 10th. 1918, so two of the Power Boys are caught in that conscription web, Tom and John.
Right.
And their thing was, I literally have a family depending on me here in Arizona. I have literally nothing to do with Austria-Hungary Empire or Germany or Spain or Russia. I have nothing to do with any of those people at all. They've been at war for thousands of years. They'll handle it or they won't. They're like, and that's, mind you, now people hearing this are like, that's unpatriotic. The United States, our official position was, we are not going to send troops to Europe. Period.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
The Power Brothers were the original America First peeps.
Badasses.
Yep, exactly.
And so they said, no, we're not going to go potentially die thousands of miles away so that some European dictator can satisfy his lust for power and gold.
Right.
That doesn't sound like something we should sign up for or that we should feel morally obliged to do, albeit reluctantly. Sometimes, you have things you do, like in the Iliad, right? It explains sometimes you do things reluctantly, but you do them because you're morally obliged to in some way. And so they're like, we're not registering for the draft. We're not going to. So all of a sudden that decision, we're not registering. Tom and John Power, when you say their name, tip your cap. Tom and John Power saying, we're not doing that. Right. We're staying home. We're working our farm. We're working at our mines. We're not doing the thing. That very moment, they become enemies of the state. They become felons.
Yep.
At that very decision of we're not doing that, they're felons. And so that their isolation, the family's isolation made it easy to overlook them. But like I said, if you're sending out federal marshals and the sheriff, eventually the sparseness of the population is what helps them find the power boys.
Right.
Because
and I think and this just makes me so ill thinking about this. Because here's this sheriff, McBride is his name. And McBride is this so-called Christian. I say so-called because I don't know any Christian that would do this kind of thing. Right. But he writes a letter to the federal government, and he's the sheriff in the county, and he says, there's some people out here that are hard to track down. I'm happy to, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them all. So would you please, with some government men, would you please bring some government men so we can help, bring these people and force them to go die for nothing. And
literally for nothing.
Zero, right.
The United States was no safer after war. I mean, the fact that we call it World War I tells you how successful and necessary a war it was. Mm-hmm. Because if it was successful, we wouldn't call it World War I. We'd call it what they did before and call it the Great War.
Right.
But we don't call that. Guess why? Because there was a World War II. And why was there a World War II? Because World War I was a setup.
Right.
And there was
the fact is, anybody who does any really good research on this will tell you that if America never entered World War I, there would have been a much more diplomatic peace settled, and Germany would not have had to give an ultimate surrender, and World War II probably doesn't happen.
Dude, we should do a podcast about World War I. It was one of those stories when I used to teach it in world history or in American history, the kids would just be like slack-jawed because they've never been taught the truth of these things. And anyway, but just suffice to say, it wasn't cowardice that kept these rugged cowboys from fighting a war. And in fact, if it had been a war that would have protected their life, liberty, and property, they'd have been all about it.
Right. So,
but in fact, as we know, it precipitated the modern military-industrial complex that we know today that, to a man, the Founding Fathers said would be the death knell of the Confederation known as the United States.
Exactly.
And so you got, what was it, Sheriff McBride?
Sheriff McBride. And there's and this is interesting. So I think it's their sister dies under, you could say unusual circumstances, but I mean, they were in the rugged out there. Ola May, I think was her name. And so the sheriff immediately, because, anyway, he calls an inquest on the death.
That's right. Yeah.
Of Ola May. And so there they are mourning their sister's death. And the sheriff comes and he's basically threatening them, saying, "Hey, you need to come register. We're going to come get you." And in fact, it was really.
And they arrived at dawn, right? That was the deal.
Well,
okay,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell it.
Yeah, this is before that because Jeff was so upset with the sheriff, he did not even sign the death certificate. Somebody else had to sign the death certificate for her. And of course, the rumors were out there that, some nefarious stuff was going on with her and the gossip world. And this is where I think, the anti-Christian Christians out there, the Pharisees of this world, gossiping about these people, saying that maybe she was pregnant, maybe she was this, maybe they were that, and just anything to get you to think like the Power Brothers were different, were out there, were not worthy people. That basically to dehumanize this family.
That's true.
And what's interesting is so the government.
So she died you said she died in childbirth, right?
No. She died under unusual circumstances. They said that
I thought she died in childbirth. No,
I believe their mother died in childbirth.
Okay.
Jeff's wife died in childbirth. But Ola Mae died. Like they thought that maybe she broke her neck. It was something like that. But come on, you're living in the country. I mean, things are going to happen. Anyway, the federal government do send the G-men to go to go chase the Power Brothers and anybody else, frankly. And that's when we have this kind of this melding of the 19th and 20th century, because all these government people are coming in cars and stuff before they get on their horseback, and the Power Brothers are hightailing it for the hills.
Well, yeah, I mean that so they come at dawn, right, hoping to catch them completely by surprise and completely unawares. And you know what happened exactly? It's kind of like the shot heard around the world. Nobody knows exactly what happened, but we do know that the posse approached their cabin, and the power, you know, they shooting started, the shootout started.
Right.
The brothers, of course, said we acted in self-defense. We were outgunned, outmanned, and they did absolutely outgunned, outmanned, firing in self-defense.
By the way, the warrant for their arrest there was two things on there. The first thing was the draft dodging, but the second thing was threatening anybody to come arrest them for draft dodging. Right. You know, which I'm like, wait, this is like you know, setting the guy up in such a way, like yeah, I mean, of course I'm going to defend myself from being kidnapped.
Right. I mean, it's the weirdest thing that I can imagine happening today, because make no mistake about it, there will be another draft.
Yes.
There will be another draft. Fortunately,
your daughters.
And your daughters will be involved. Fortunately, I'm too old and too fat to be drafted. Never thought those two things would come in handy before, but they do. But there will be another draft, and you can pin and mount this comment because it will happen. There'll be another draft, and I can see them in some future National Defense Authorization Act where they implement the conscription, that is to say the kidnapping of American citizens for not fighting for in some foreign civil war. You know, whether it be at the behest of Israel or the behest of Ukraine or the behest of South Korea, or you name your ally.
Right.
And they will make it a crime not only to so-called dodge the draft, in other words, evade kidnapping, but they will also make it a crime to claim that you intend to do so. Mm-hmm. Guys, I hope you're listening and paying attention. Mark this down, write it in your little book with this date, because someday I want you to say, holy crap, they called that exactly right. But we know that's going to happen because that's what has happened. I have no lamp by which my feet are guided, but the lamp of history. Right.
Thank you, Patrick.
Patrick Henry, that's right. Salute. So this is what happened to the Power Boys. Here comes the feds. Here come the local sheriff, just like today, freaking sheriffs in cahoots with the feds.
By the way, but I was going to say that's the other, all of a sudden you have this, instead of having these true separation of powers.
Yeah, man.
You have this.
Instead of having a sheriff with some stugats.
Right.
Like what was that? What was that sheriff in the sheriff in Nevada when it was the Bundy people?
Right.
With him refusing to say, no, you're not coming in here and, doing this to our citizens. You just stand by and let them rape and pillage.
Right. Yep. So they, so shooting happens and
a shootout, dude. But one of you look at back in the day, this was New York Times.
Right.
I mean, the New York Times carried the story of this bloody shootout.
Yeah, this is probably like Waco before Waco. This is like,
yeah, it was the same sense of it. I mean, those of us who believe that the smallest minority is the individual, and that the government, any government destructive of my life, liberty, and property is my enemy and the enemy of all mankind and deserves to be treated as such. You see in this a pattern that's been followed so many times and will continue to be followed by despots. So until the Lord sets his foot on the Mount of Olives again, until that day, despots will follow this same design. And you have these young men.
And it breaks my freaking heart because those who should know better, the people in these communities, they've been taught. And they've been taught that there's no Christ but King, or no King but Christ. And they've been taught, to love your neighbor, to be forgiving. They've been taught that we shouldn't go to war. All these things they've been taught. And yet, the first chance that they get to get some recognition, to get some praise from the empire, to get something, from Satan himself, they jump at the opportunity.
Maybe hoping to get, a little something from the empire, right? A little free pass, a little get out of jail free card, hoping to get something from Caesar. They, these kids, so it's Tom, John, and then their family friend, right?
Tom and John.
Sisson. Tom Sisson, is that, I have it? Yeah, Tom Sisson.
Yeah.
Is their friend. So they take off into the wilderness, it's very Ruby Ridge, except Ruby Ridge, they didn't get to escape. But you have this rugged cabin in the wilderness, and you have 3 people caught there in the shootout who managed to escape, Tom, John, and then a friend of theirs who was there. And they just have to run off into the wilderness, leaving their blood-soaked cabin and their dead family members behind.
Yep.
And who did that? Now, there's no mistaking that but for the acts of Sheriff McBride, those people would not have been killed.
100%. 100%. And I think they were trying to make their way to Mexico. I think that was
ultimately that's what I think they were. Yeah, they were trying to make their way to Mexico to get out of the territorial, the jurisdiction, as we say, of the United States.
And by the way, and this is the thing that this is where I get to my table turning segment, because it makes me so angry when I hear people say, like, one of the commenters on, said that, they left, 3 widows and 19 children. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why the hell were they there? I mean, why, if they wouldn't have gone, they wouldn't have put their children at risk. Why put your children at risk?
Right. It's like when people tell me, well, the citizens of Boston egged on the soldiers that caused the Boston Massacre. Yeah, but guess what? If they weren't occupying a city, if the British Army hadn't been occupying Boston, there would have been no Don't blame it on the citizens who are pissed that at every corner of their supposedly free city, there is a garrison of British troops.
Right.
You idiot. You bootlicking son of a gun. Don't blame the citizens for throwing snowball. They threw a snowball. Who cares? So these widows and these children, they're not left there because Tom and his brother and because they're wusses, because they're just afraid and no, they're left there because this sheriff and this marshal, what was his name, that marshal? I have it written down here. Let's see. Because he deserves a lot of reproach as well. Frank Haynes.
Yes.
And then 2 deputies, Kane Wooten and Glenn Reynolds.
That's right. The Wooten.
I hope they're all enjoying the what is it? What does the Lord say? Their
vengeance. The fruits of their
the wages that they've earned on earth.
Yes.
I hope they're enjoying those wages today.
Yeah. Because once again, we're learning and this is such an important thing, and why am I framing it this way? Because we have to learn the right lesson. We can't learn the poor widows, the poor children. The poor children should never been put at risk.
There you go.
We're calling it's the opposite. The attackers were the ones, the defenders were defending themselves, not the other way around.
There you go. And that's the thing. If someone comes to take your life, liberty, or property, and that person coming to attack you on your property is killed, that's per se self-defense. There's no argument that, well, we were carrying out the law. First of all, it's not a law.
Right.
First of all, because you can't be unjust and you can't have a law where people give their consent to someone to kidnap them and force them into a fort. That's ridiculous.
Right.
No one agrees.
I thought we decided on the whole slavery issue,
Right. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but only if it's, it doesn't count if you're sent over, if you're captured by a federal marshal and sent to France.
Right. Then you could be a slave.
Then you're fine to be a slave. So these guys take off into the rugged mountains that they know oh so well, and that the feds don't know so well. Now, McBride was killed in the shootout, right?
McBride was killed in the shootout, and I think Wooten was killed.
Wooten and Haynes were all, the two deputies and McBride,
right,
were all killed.
It was all the feds that were chasing them.
Right. So the feds are then chasing them. Oh, and Jeff, the patriarch, got killed as well.
Yeah, Jeff was killed. Yeah, I mean, really, it's the two brothers and them, and I forgot the story, but somehow they rounded a corner and basically walked into the federal marshals.
Yeah, they're right near the border with Mexico. By the way, they were literally probably a day from escaping.
Yeah,
maybe less, depending on how they're. And this is guys. I know you've never heard this story, because I've never heard this story until until our friend Connor got married, and his father-in-law, who's from this area, I think, right?
Yeah, he's
was telling us all about how they were going to go visit the cabin or something, right? Wasn't that what he was saying?
Oh no, they had visited the cabin. They had
visited. That's right.
Yeah,
because you go on horseback, because you can't drive up there. You still go on horseback.
It's still pretty rugged out there.
Yeah, and so he's telling us about this. So I know you've never heard this story. So, pay attention. This thing was the stuff of legends. There were, like I said, there were national newspapers. This was a manhunt to beat all manhunts. This was all over the country. People knew of this story, how these feds were chasing down. And of course, even back then, the American public, they divide into which side they are supporting in this man. Are you supporting the family who, in self-defense, had to defend themselves from the rape and pillage of the federal government, who were trying to kidnap the boys to send them to fight in a war we were promised we'd never get involved in? Or are you in favor of the feds who are trying to capture domestic terrorists? Which side? And today, that is still
still the same question.
Still a division in our country.
Right.
If there was a draft tomorrow, and just for the sake of discussion, you and I were included in that draft, there are people who call themselves conservatives who would oppose us trying to get out of that.
Right.
Because they just, for whatever reason, love the taste of shoe leather.
Man,
nothing tastes as good as jackboot in the morning.
That's right. No, that's a fact. It baffles me how we love to be told what to do. There's got to be a way you could test this. Maybe that's the test. Are you going to stand up when
Maybe there's a gene. You know how they've done the genome sequence?
Right.
Maybe we can I'm serious. Maybe we can somehow isolate a gene.
The jackboot gene.
Yeah, the gene that would say you're not going to give in to unjust edicts.
Right.
Or a gene that, how they have ancestry that'll say, you probably, given your genetic structure, you probably like the taste of cilantro or something. You know how they do that?
Right, yeah.
They might have it. The next one would be like, given your genetic makeup, you probably enjoy the taste of boot leather.
There's a long line of boot leather lovers out there.
It's like if you're a girl and your boyfriend or husband supports the draft, then you and he are probably both seeing other men.
I think you're right.
Just saying. Just saying.
I think you're right. Oh,
so March 8th, 1918.
Is right when they're captured?
Right near the border of Mexico.
They're captured. And like by the way, here's another like they to me, what lends credence to the story so much is, I mean, they weren't gun wielding. You know, this wasn't Sundance.
No, they were just escaping. Yeah,
right. And so when they were captured, I mean, they went peacefully.
Well, they didn't really have a choice,
right? but what I'm saying is you know, I just think, you know, you can tell. I
think they really believed they were innocent.
I think they thought that there would be enough people that believed the same thing.
That's okay. That's even better take. That's a better take, Mike, because they probably thought they had the fatal flaw that all patriots have, that we assume people are going to see patriotism how it really is and not how the tyrants define it for you. And so they probably thought, good, arrest us because we'll be there's no jury in the country that would convict us.
Yep.
Au contraire, mon frère. Oh, because by this time, the federal government had already whipped up the nation into this bellicose fever of, you know, the Yanks are coming. We're coming to set our European cousins free from the yoke of, you know, the Hun or whatever. You know, it's one of those things. We had already been whipped up into a patriotic fever dream.
Right.
And, you know, so it was just the deck was stacked against the Power Brothers.
Yeah, it really was. And they were convicted and they were sent to Florence prison.
Charged with first-degree murder.
First-degree murder, right.
Life in prison.
You know, it's interesting. Again, it makes me ill because I've seen interviews with some of, like, especially like the Wooten clan, you know, where they would say we would band as a family every time there was a parole hearing. We would band as a family, make sure we were there to protest their parole hearing, make sure they stayed in prison where they belonged.
Where they belong? What are you talking? I mean, I need somebody who can explain to me how, if an idea is so good, you have to kidnap people to get them to go along with it. That makes sense to you. That is just that is the type of law that you support.
Yep.
An idea so good, the youth of America have to be kidnapped to execute the idea. That somehow that's a just use of the consent of the governed. Explain that to me, man.
Joe, you don't understand. It's for the greater good, Joey. It's for the greater. It's a social contract for the greater good.
Greater? What greater? You know, I mean, it's like, was anything better off? Because no. Like, literally, this family was wrecked. Guys, do you understand that because of World War I, every family in America was wrecked? Don't get it twisted and highlight this and put it on social media. World War I not only caused the destruction of the Power family, it caused the destruction of every family in this country.
Yep. And this is why, like, this story, like you said it perfectly before, this story is a microcosm of the country. Like, you know, individualism was destroyed, sovereignty was destroyed, liberty was destroyed.
Gender roles, the nuclear mom being at home, dad working, all that was gone because suddenly you needed women in the workforce. Suddenly you needed what? If you make it where women can vote and you convince women that by voting then they are equal to their husbands, then what do you get? First of all, you get women who are going to vote for the tyrant every time because the tyrant's the one telling them they're not equal, they're second-class citizens, and we will give you equal status. And then what happens? They go out and they get a job. And then what happens? The tyrant get twice the tax money, right? Plus, they now have a whole segment of society who believes that the tyrant is doing what's best for them. And then what happens? Now you get women in the workforce. Adultery, the feeling of I mean, we even joke about it, about work husband and work wife. That's reprehensible and unconscionable. There's no such thing as harmless flirting.
Right.
And you get this because y'all don't get it. This is what happens because of World War One. Yeah. And you've got all of this stacked up together: the Federal Reserve, Federal Department of Education, the income tax, the women voting. You've got all of this happening at the same time, and all for one purpose: to destroy the families of the United States. And talk about Satan being successful. A big W for Satan on this one.
Yep.
And there was a time, guys, when no one would have argued that the Power Brothers were unpatriotic, were outlaws, were criminals. They would have described them as Americans.
Right.
Americans worthy of that name. Yep. But because of, by 1918, forget it. The country, there was no patriotism of the sort demonstrated on Lexington Green on April 19th, 1775. There was none of that left.
Yeah, that's a sad truth, and I think, because things get so twisted, literally upside down and backwards. We start to, like, I'll give another example from this story. A guy, and I don't want to soft pedal. Like, I don't want to, like, say those other people didn't suffer because of it. In other words, yes, there was families without fathers because of this incident. There were children that did not have their father at home and probably paid a price for that. But the principle is, when you interview these people and they say, oh, we've decided that we've forgiven the Power Brothers. I'm sorry. No, you should have been asking forgiveness from the Power Brothers. Like, that is 100% opposite of what happened in this story. And unless you have a completely deluded mind that whatever Washington says is right, and whatever the New York Times says is right, or whatever your mayor or your sheriff says is true, if you have this deluded idea that is a fact, that's how you're going to portray the story. If you actually look at what's happening and you believe in natural rights, natural law, and you believe in natural property rights, and that we own ourselves and we have the right to say no. What's a bad war? Any war I don't want to fight.
Well, yeah, and think about it this way. I was just looking at my copy of Henry V, and I thought I had it. I mean, I do have it there, but it'd take a minute to find it. But well, no, I'm going to pause you can keep talking, Mike. I'm going to get that because I want to read right from his words, because I think they're I'm just going to cut my video for a second, but you keep talking and I'm going to grab this because I think what he says in Henry V, I think if we applied it today, we all will get rah Henry V. Yeah, that was awesome. Battle of Agincourt. Yeah, it fires you up. But if you apply that to today, it reveals the fatal flaw in the argument of those who say, well, social contract, we should, if the law says go to war, you go to war, and if you don't, you're an outlaw, and why that's wrong. So you keep on with the thing.
Yeah, go look at that, because I think that goes back to, like, what is true law. We talked about a couple weeks ago about what makes a great leader. And one of the things that makes a great leader is they never go over and above their authority. The moment that they go over and above their authority, they lose that same authority. Think about like a father who, the child says, why do you need me to do something? And you say, because I'm your father. That's the reason. Well, now you've lost your authority. But if you go with loving kindness, if you try to explain the situation, you have long suffering, love, all of these kind of attributes, then you can convince somebody to do something. But if you do it because of, I would stop in the name of the law, well, by definition, you've lost that authority. Now, you may still be able to stop people because you have a gun, and because you have bribed judges. And trust me, every judge is a bribed judge. They receive a government check. Therefore, they are a bribed judge. All of those things, you need to understand what law is, what law is not. And the second somebody over exceeds their authority, exceeds the law, they no longer have that authority. It's gone. It's over. Amen to the authority of that man, as the good book says. You finding it there?
Yeah, I found it. Hold on just a second. Yeah. So, Henry V. Now, I want you to apply this to see if you can come, let us reason together. Think about how this can apply to what we're talking about. Not only the Power Brothers, but King Henry's response here. Think about how this applies to the concept of a draft at all. That the government will kidnap young men and now young women and send them to die in foreign civil wars that have no effect on the life, liberty, or property of Americans, particularly of the Americans being sent. Because let's be honest, it does improve the life and the property, the wealth of the ammunitions makers, all the defense contractors, all the merchants of death, and all those people in the palaces of power that do their bidding, all those people whose hands are drenched in blood, and who the blood of the good people of this country cry from the ground for retribution from he who will come with his terrible swift sword. All that blood cries from the ground for retribution, and vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. Right? So all you merchants of death, all of you that are enriched by the sacrifice of the young people of this country, I want you to think about how the concept of that draft applies here to what Henry says. So you've got them here at the Battle of Agincourt, yeah? And Westmoreland says, so they're facing against the French, right? The English against the French. Henry V believes, and it's arguably true, that he has a right to the crown of France. So the French are defending it. They're there in Agincourt, and they're facing off, but they're outnumbered, right? They're just overwhelmingly outnumbered. So Westmoreland says to Henry V, he says, oh, that we had now here but 1/10,000th of those men in England that do no work today. Okay, so what's Westmoreland saying? We're outnumbered. We could be more likely to be successful if we had 1/10,000th of all the men still in England who aren't here on this battlefield. So if we had a draft, imagine, he's saying, Your Majesty, if we had a draft, even if we had 1/10,000th of those men who are still in England that should be here, we'd be more likely to be successful. Now so a government today would say, do you know what? That's a great idea. Let's initiate a draft. And it'll be incremental. Don't get it twisted. It'll be incremental because that's how tyrants behave. Silent and gradual.
Right.
Right? And King Henry says this, what's he that wishes so, my cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin, if we're marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater the share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, nor do I care who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if men my garments wear, such outward things dwell not in my desire. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I'm the most offending soul alive. No, faith, my cousin, wish not a man from England. God's peace I would not lose so great an honor, as one man more, methinks, would share for me. Now, apply that. If you really believe in the cause of Ukraine versus Russia, get your candy ass over to the Ukraine and sign up in their Foreign Legion. Because you see, then you mark yourself out. If you win that war, you mark yourself out for a degree, a share of the honor due to those men who, in the name of freedom, fought what they thought was a good fight. But if you send men over by the tens of thousands, first of all, not all of those men are going to fight with the ferocity that you need, because they know what? They know they were forced to be here. They have no idea why they're there. They know they're probably going to get killed, or there's a likelihood of it. And all they want to do is fulfill the terms of their draft enlistment and get back home. And if that includes hiding away, using you as a human shield, whatever it takes, that's what will happen. Why can't we see it this way? That, you know what, maybe the president goes on TV or goes to Truth Social or X or something and says, here's how I see it. The Ukraine is being, oppressed by Putin. If I had, he does, I guess, have a son now who's 18. So, I am encouraging Barron to sign up for the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, and I would encourage all y'all who feel that the cause of Ukraine is just to do likewise. Here's a link to find out information on how to join the Ukrainian Foreign Legion and get over there and fight. That accomplishes the end of helping fight for what you believe is the cause of liberty, and it avoids the necessity of A, kidnapping on American soil, and B, putting into war zones people who want nothing more than to get out. Mm-hmm. They're not going to fight with courage, with bravery, with ferocity. You don't know the stranger standing at your right. Will he defend you? Will he charge up the hill with you? Will he pretend to have an injury? Will he hold back? You have no idea, because you don't know him. Because he was just dragnet snatched up from flyover country the same way you were.
Yep.
And so you don't know.
And C, it would either cut off completely, hopefully, but at least limit the amount of stolen money from the rest of us that is going into that same conflict, supporting that.
Right. And it would eliminate the need for, look, I'm not in favor of even a dime, right, of federal disaster money. Don't believe such a thing should exist, because I believe if we are a Christian country, our duty is to our neighbor. And we saw that, right? We saw that in North Carolina and Tennessee after the hurricane. But we still have people in North Carolina and Tennessee who don't have homes and won't have them for the foreseeable future, don't have power, who their lives are wrecked because of an act of God. And yet somehow we find billions to send to a foreign dictator in the Ukraine. If you don't believe Zelensky's, Google my name and Zelensky, you'll see the types of things he's gotten up to. He's literally a stand-up comedian who found a way to charm the CIA, get himself installed as the dictator, the freedom fighter of the Ukraine, and then today gets billions and billions. And what does he do? Did you see how he has 2 big penthouses in Miami?
Right.
right? He just bought his wife this magnificent, what was it, Lamborghini or a Bentley or something, some magnificent car, right? Where do you think he gets his money? Not from his stand-up career.
Probably not even from his government paycheck.
No. That's from money stolen from you. But see, you get to take no share of the honor because that money was stolen from you. But if that link that the president shared not only had a link to sign up for the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, but it had a link to Venmo money directly to the government of Ukraine. You know what I'm saying? Then
right.
Even if you're getting fooled, it's on you.
Right.
Right. But and if it comes out successful and ends up being this thing that people are like, wow, that really, then you get to share the honor, and you don't have to share like Henry said. No, I don't want to share the honor with someone who's forced to be here. No, I don't want to go over to England and drag those 1/10,000th of the men to this battlefield, because then we have to share honor with those who aren't honorable.
Yep.
Right. So all of this, the Power Brothers were the exemplary ideal of American patriotism, of love of family, of loathing of despotism. Right? That's who we all used to be. We all used to be the Power Brothers.
It's always there, and it's not 100%, but there seems to always be a correlation between, people having terrible, awful home lives, personal lives. It's a complete mess, and demanding others to pay for bigger, pay for big issues, like climate change or Ukraine or all like, wait, how do you get off, demanding money from me when your life is a complete mess? Why don't you put your house in order first? And I think that that's the thing, is when you have when you have the love of liberty, it automatically locks your priorities into place. Like, you can't help but say, I have to take care of my family first. Like, that's my number one priority. And if it's, when we kind of,
and in fairness, sometimes protecting your family requires going beyond the borders of your farm and fighting a foreign or domestic foe. Sometimes it requires that.
But that's when it's clear.
But that's very clear. Right. That's when it's like Henry V said, we're here. We believe this is true. This is for I don't want to share honor with it, but it's clear to you. And if it isn't clear to your neighbor, then guess what? If it all goes south and you lose your property and your neighbor, at least you tried, and you get to say that as Christians, man. I don't know why we don't cling more tightly to the concept. We have to live well, but we have to die well.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we fear it so much if we have a belief, a testimony in a heaven and a God that rewards righteousness? Why do we fear it so much? Why? Man. What is so good about this place that it makes you want to cling to it instead of go to heaven?
Yep.
You want to stay here and be under the boot of a tyrant instead of doing all you can to fight against tyranny and maybe die in the struggle, but be rewarded by He who is the creator and the Father of all righteousness. What is your deal, man? Why do you want to die like I don't want to say the word, like a coward?
Coward?
Yeah.
Well, brother,
came up with a more palatable word.
Listen, this is why we bring up these stories. We apply, learn.
Oh, you should. We haven't told the end of the story, dude.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, tell the end of the story. The end of the story is the kooky part, and you have this on lock. So go ahead and tell it.
Well, so I'm not sure which part you're referring to now.
Well, I'm talking about when they go to prison, and in the 1960s.
Well, yeah.
So they served over 40 years.
Oh, yeah. So they're serving. So, by the way, let's go back.
Okay.
What happened in the 1920s?
There you go. Okay.
Warren Harding gave a pardon to all the draft dodgers, right? Well, guess what? They weren't convicted for draft dodging.
There you go. They were convicted of first-degree murder.
Right. And so they were the longest serving prisoners, by the way. And these guys were such studs. Like,
oh yeah,
I mean, they were given special permission to actually live outside the walls of the prison and start a garden. Like, it's
but
crazy.
You know what? Before you go into that, let me just make a point that y'all understand something. If the war for independence had been lost, then take out the word, Power Brothers and insert Samuel Adams, insert John Hancock, insert Paul Revere, insert Thomas Jefferson, insert George Washington. You get it? The fact that we won turns those men into heroes. If we'd lost, they would have been convicted not only of treason, but of murder, and they would have each hanged by the neck until dead. So you need to realize that because we won, those men are heroes and patriots. The Power Brothers were on the losing side. So to the victor go, the spoils. So here the federal government gets to paint them as criminals and as murderers.
Right.
And so they end up, so there you go. But just remember, they're on the losing side. That's why they get painted this way. If they'd been on the winning side, then we would all know their name and we would speak of them the way we do Samuel Adams or John Hancock or any of the revolutionary heroes.
Right. And so and like I said before, like there were several members of all the families that were killed that were not supporting parole. And so they would always fight against it. Though I think the Wootons were the most ferocious about it, but the McBrides. There is a great story, Kempton, where his father had died in the shootout, and he had he was 13 years old when his father died, and he was very bitter against the Power Brothers, and he was a Mormon, good old Mormon boy. And they was asked to serve a mission. He thought, what are you, crazy? I have a widowed mother, but the mother said, no, you should go. And he went and was reading in Matthew about how, you should forgive everyone. And, he thought, like the scriptures were talking to him. He said, I need to forgive. I need to let this thing go. And so years later, he ends up married and driving through Phoenix, and he stops at the prison and has an hour-long conversation with Tom Powers, and shook his hand. They were able to make peace. But these guys, to say these guys were like exemplary prisoners is an understatement. I mean, like I said, the wardens completely trusted them. They were able to. They started a garden outside the prison that they tended themselves. It's called Powers Garden. And finally in the 60s, and I think this is where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Finally in the 60s, a bunch of Mormon elders, 3 of them specifically, gather the people and finally go to the parole hearing and basically read the riot act to the people and said, this is wrong, that these people need to be let go, that we need to show them kindness and free them. And so after 40 plus years, like the stake president apparently gave a booming speech that shook the parole board, and let the Lord have vengeance, but I think about this, like we read the Iliad together, and there's that part at the end of the Iliad when the names are the father of the king of Troy,
Priam.
Yeah, he's begging for his son's body.
Yeah.
And he finally goes in person and begs for his son's body. And to me, one of the takeaways
to Achilles, he goes to
from
Achilles.
Achilles,
Yeah,
right? He goes to Achilles and he's begging for, and Achilles is just a madman, right? And is showing no mercy, even after the death of his son. And he goes to him and he begs Achilles, as a father, for the body of his son. And Achilles allows him to have it. And I've always thought, like, it takes a demigod to show that kind of, to show any like, forgiveness is not a human thing. That is a godly thing. And I think, in that same way, it took God in the form of these, church leaders to call a riot act down on these people and say, it's time to let this thing go. And they did, and they were finally released. They ended up, I think Tom, I can't remember. No, I think it was John. I think John ended up living until 1976. So I mean, like, this again, like, I cannot think of a better 19th to 20th century bridge than these two brothers. And according to everybody who knew them after they were let out of prison, they were the sweetest men. They were the same cowboys. Like, they knew the land better than anybody in the area. They would take them out and tell stories about the area. They were cowboys through and through. They gave they had made spurs, Spanish spurs, for the there was a reporter who kind of took on their cause.
right.
And so when they were let out of prison, they actually made him spurs and gave them as a gift, which I think is just beautiful. I mean, I think, like, to me, these are boys without guile.
Yeah, for sure.
They really are. And I think that every time I will have a fond thought of them, forever. They have influenced my life. Like, I want to be more like them.
Yeah, I looked up to see how they, so Tom Power died in San Francisco in September 1970.
Okay.
And John lived in this home area until 1976. They never made any money off their mine. The mine was eventually sold in the 30s, and the mine to this day has only yielded 163 ounces of gold.
Wow.
So that wasn't in 1975. Their cabin was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, I would encourage you to go. And the old man, the patriarch, right, Jeff. So he's buried there with his wife and his daughter. And on his tombstone, it says, "Shot down with his hands up in his own door."
Wow.
Now, look up Ruby Ridge, and you will see that this is not a historical account of something that would only happen in the Old West. This happened, historically speaking.
It's like an echo. It's like, the truth happens again and again and again.
Right. Yeah. And so now I hope you have, to add to your pantheon of American heroes, you have the Power Boys from Arizona, who did what all of us should do, man. Protect life, liberty, and property. Fight against tyranny till the last drop of blood. As my wife the other day, we were talking about, the end and what will be like and everything. And Kylie's like, "I know you just want to be propped up against a broad oak." And, that really literally, I learned that from Mike. And that literally has become a thing that I say now in my mind and in our family is, Joey just wants to be propped up against a broad oak. Don't even take me off the field. Let my dying eyes witness the death of tyrants and those who do their bidding.
Yeah.
Let my last earthly vision be of that of some, federal agent getting his, and, waiting for him on the other side.
Yeah.
Just look him in the eyes and say, guess what, buddy? One of us was on the wrong side of that.
That's right. Time for you to repent.
And so, yeah, the Power Boys, Tom and John Power.
By the way, for those of you who didn't get that reference, look up the episode on Hugh Mercer. Look it up.
Mercer, yeah.
Broad oaks abound.
Broad oak. So yeah, Tom and John Power, rest in peace. Thank you for exactly.
Liberty loves
Thank you for your love of liberty and family and your example of knowing how to live well and how to die well, which is a lesson all of the patriots need to remember today.
Amen. Brother, thank you for your time. Thanks for doing this, man.
Come on, man. It's a pleasure to talk about it. We've been planning this for forever.
Months.
Yeah, to get to talk about him is an honor because I really do think there'll be people and people in Arizona are gonna be like, I had no idea.
Yeah,
and y'all can go down there. Y'all can go down and see the what's left of the cabin, see the area around there. It geographically looks exactly like it looked back then. So you can.
I think there was a documentary made about it.
I think it's called
Powers War. So go check that out too. It looked like it was pretty.
On the YouTubes?
No, it's on Vimeo. I saw it on Vimeo. I saw it on. I think it's on Netflix. Called Powers War. I haven't seen it. I looked at the trailers and it looked like, I think there's going to be some bootlicking happening there, but I think you'll get the story, and that's the main thing.
Yeah. So there was let's see what it is. Power Shootout and Arizona Tragedy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so what was it? What year was that? That was 2015.
2015.
Yeah, so they went and made a story about it. Graham County, famous down there. So yeah, I guess it's called. I guess it's called the Power
Shootout.
Yeah, Power Shootout. I guess is what this says. I'm hoping that's right. It's maybe it's a different. Maybe there's a different document. Powers War. There we go. Powers War is the documentary.
There you go.
There we go. Powers War is the documentary. It's got 8 out of 10 stars, apparently. So Powers War. And so it's apparently on Prime, Amazon Prime.
Good. Well, I think there isn't a better story for right now because as things are ramping up, we see what's happening in Syria, we see what's happening in Ukraine, we see,
Israel.
Israel. We see what's happening with, there always seems to be rumblings in Taiwan and South Korea, and so as you said before, this is going to happen again. This is going to reverberate, and it's going to be up to hashtag stop the cycle.
Yeah, it's going to you can just mark it down. It's going to happen.
Yep. So how do we respond to that? And I think the Powers responded with honor.
Yeah, there's no question about that. They feel comfortable with what they did in the presence of their Lord. I think to explain why you carried out the edicts, the murderous edicts of a tyrant, is going to be a harder sell to the Savior.
I agree. Yeah. Brother, we'll do it again.
We will do it very soon. We won't let so much time go by, and we're gonna, like you said, we're gonna. What did you call it? A simulpod?
We're gonna simulpod this. Baby.
Simulpod this trademark. Ooh, there you go.
No!
We're gonna simulpod this and put it on. So, Return to Tradition, and If Love Remains, and Teacher of Liberty. We'll put it up on all three, and I will.
So if you see it on one of those, subscribe.
Go see it on the other one. Yeah, if you see it on one, go to the other, comment on it. Trigger the algorithm, because Please. I'll be honest with you, Mike's podcast is unlike any other podcast. You never know what you're going to get week to week. That's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it brilliant. And you're just liable to see anything. The story of the Power Brothers just as likely as you are to hear the story of behind the scenes of the Narnia Chronicles, for goodness sake. So so do yourself.
It is eclectic.
It is eclectic, and that's the joy of it. So. Anyway, yeah, y'all.
Well, brother, I appreciate that. And,
all right.
Of course, your stuff is always top notch. Nobody's going to talk about Sydney like my brother Joe.
Well, that's true. I hope so. Well, I mean, I wish everybody knew him, but for the meantime, I'll step into
the torch, brother.
There. Yeah, there you go.
All right.
All right. See y'all later.
See you guys. Thanks for listening.
Mike is gone.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
Gone but not forgotten.
First of 23 installments requested by Dr. Leavitt. Trying to be in compliance here because we're taking him and that whole organization down.
Speak peace like a Buddhist.